All right, Bertram, taking a look at your assignment from week 5, first draft, and let's see how you did with this. So, um, first thing you've done is I can tell you've used APA, so that's good, and your um, paper here looks, your heading and everything looks good. Now, for your final draft, when you do your final project in week 7, it'll be a two-part. This is part 1, so you'll revise and fix anything that I tell you that I mentioned needs fixed in this one, and then have it as part 1 of your project. For that final project, I would suggest coming up with a nice, interesting title for the whole thing, something that reflects your what you're actually trying to do. It could be the title. It could be a title that says something like how you're um, evaluating an article, such and such article, right, or something like that. So a little bit more interesting title would be better for the final big project. Okay. Otherwise, everything looks very good here. Um, page 1. I guess you try and be a little fancy with that. I suppose that's okay. It's not necessarily the way they call for it to be, but I won't say anything about it. I won't say it's wrong. It's wrong. Now you should have your title here again at the top of page 2. I know it doesn't show you that properly in the exemplar, but I'm pretty sure that's about the only problem with any of the exemplars is the fact that it doesn't include that. So it's not a big deal if you don't put it there, but technically speaking, the title should be here again on page 2. And so that's it. So now let's take a look at how you've done with the actual criteria here. So over here you can see the first thing I look for is the topic. So I need to see somewhere here that you're discussing the topic for the past 2 decades, the whole life approach to managing work in the tech industry that was preventing coming to an end. We're also okay. So remove this period here. You only need a period after the parenthetical whenever there are parentheticals. Okay, so remove that period here and just keep this one here. Also, you should have in here a page or paragraph number. Okay, so that's something else should be in each one of your parentheticals. All right, known for its generous perks, high salaries, and progressive employee culture, the tech industry has been attractive for which people worldwide as tech companies flourish. They advance. Recent trends, however, have drastic change in landscape. It's already good. People looking to enter the tech industry need to know looking to enter the tech industry. So that looks like it might be your audience. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that that's your audience, and I'm going to go ahead and put that down here. Mark that because that looks like it's your audience. And also, you talking about how the changes are happening and if they're permanent. So I think that's going to be your topic. So good for that. Nadia Rawson introduces a thought-provoking evaluation factors influencing the work culture of the tech industry. So the Okay, so your introduction here is a bit long. You could probably whittle it down a little bit so that it's not quite so long. Really, all you need is just an introductory statement like you've done here, which is a quote from her actual article, and then tell your audience a little bit about what the topic is and why it's important and who the audience is. In other words, incorporate these things here, but you don't need to do them in too long you don't need to take too long to do that. So, what I'm looking for now is your actual thesis statement. And I'm going to assume that maybe it's right here. Rawson contends that the employee-centric culture in the tech industry and its workers are facing potential permanent change due to economic connections affecting the industry workers, but overlooks the possibility. Okay, so you probably ought to have a comma here. Well, no. Since okay, never mind that. No comma here. But overlooks the possibility that the continuous emergence of technology and the inevitable need for specialized talent to support it might lie in the future. She successfully recounts the history of the industry's culture and identifies optimism by displaced workers. Okay, so again, not too bad. Probably a little bit wordier than it needs to be, the thesis statement. But so work a little bit on removing some of the wordiness in here and kind of just try to shrink your thesis or your introduction down to the really unnecessary information. Remember, you don't need details in the introduction. You're just introducing your audience to the topic and getting them interested in reading on further. So you don't need details. You can use generalities in here, right? So that's something you want to fix. Your purpose, I think, is clear in there as well in this part in your thesis, even though it needs a little work to be thinned down. Historical and cultural context. Employee-centric culture in the tech industry. Uh, yeah, yeah, I think we got the historical there. You talk about the past 2 decades and so forth. So, of course, that's talking about her time as far as she's concerned. But you go on to talk about how things have changed over the time. So that's good. Your core idea is there. I'd say you've done fine with all those things. And now we're into the body paragraphs, and I'm looking for details, right? So let's see what you say here. One thing that I look for in the example or in the thesis statement is a solid list of basically the three main things that you're going to do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you right now from the exemplar what I'm talking about. Notice in the exemplar here that after the introduction, at the end of the introduction, he gives the thesis statement. He says, Rose Manier argues, and that hints at the genre, arguing, for a balance between productivity and downtime, emphasizing the value of productivity and ways to be a productive worker. But although she emphasizes the importance of work-life balance, she does not offer as many ways to truly take break and improve the personal side. Now, that's the thesis statement. Now, what I'm looking for now is for your body paragraphs to actually line up with the thesis statement and in the same order. So notice the first thing she says is that she's arguing for a balance between productivity and downtime, emphasizing the value of productivity. So notice what she says here. Even though Rosemary argues for a balance between productivity and downtime, see how that relates back directly to the first part of the thesis statement? That's what you should do. You want to make sure that the first sentence of your first body paragraph, does just like that. It refers back to the very first point being made in the thesis statement. That way, it makes it easier for your audience to follow and understand that you are indeed sticking to and really driving home the points that you made in the thesis statement, right? So notice it even tells you here the first key point, as indicated in the thesis statement, is expanded upon. Right. And then you go into making your points about it. You provide source material to back up the points. Notice how whenever you have the name and date in the parenthetical, you also need to have that question or that page number. Right. Now later on, when you refer to an author's name without in a signal phrase, you don't have to have the whole thing in here. But it looks like in this example, they don't really do that. In this example, they say Rose Manier emphasizes, but then they go on to start a new paragraph, which is why they put Rose Manier again in here. But an option would have been they could have said in a few. Well, actually, right here it says in a few paragraphs she does offer options for balancing. And since it's saying she and is referring back to Rose Manier, technically speaking, they could have just left this part right here out and just put the page number in there, and I would have accepted that. I would say that is be okay, because they're following up with she, which is obviously got to be referring back to Rose Manier, right? So that would work as well. You could just have the page number here because she's already mentioned the author's name in this close to the signal phrase, right? So that's why the exemplar, by the way, is so important. It really shows you how to work through and think through all of the wording and the way you answer these questions. So that's why it's so vastly important. If you didn't really use the exemplar totally closely, take a look at it again and make sure you're doing what it shows you to do. Okay, so Rawlinson's contention that the employee-centric culture is facing potential permanent damage. That does seem to be what you've done here, actually, by the way, so good. That seems to be the same thing that you talked about at the beginning here. So very good. You've done what the exemplar shows to do. So maybe you very well are using the exemplar, and that's awesome. Now somewhere here you need to make a point. So here we go. Times, as they say, are a changin'. Rawlinson, 2023 states, as she identifies. Now, here at the end of this statement, wherever that statement ends, which I'm assuming is right here, that's where you got to put a parenthetical. And that parenthetical, like I mentioned when I was showing you the exemplar, that parenthetical only needs to have the page number in it because you've already got Rawson 2023 up here in the signal phrase. So that's something to remember. You always got to have that parenthetical at the end to help your audience, namely me, but any audience, to see where the whole idea of that parenthetical and the signal phrase is to let your audience know where your source material starts and stops, so they can tell where your voice is around that source material. Okay, so that looks good. All right. So I feel like you got some good details. I feel like your evidence is great. Your communication is very clear. Your citations are not perfect, just simply because you're missing some of them, and you don't really end with a parenthetical whenever you're quoting her, or even paraphrasing from her. You don't really end with the parenthetical that tells me what page or paragraph number it was on. So that's a bit of it's going to take a bit off on it. So every time you cite something from her, you need to have that parenthetical wherever that information ends, which in this case looks like it might not end until all the way here. And that's also not a great idea. A good thing to do to make that better would be to make sure your voice comes after the source material every single time. Let your voice introduce a point, then put the source material in there to help back up the point, and then your voice should come in again here at the end, telling your audience what you want them to get away from that, what you want them to understand from that point and that you made in the source material backing it up. Okay, so all those things need to be fixed. Your conclusion is a bit long, but it looks okay. It's just a little longer than it needs to be, but that's okay. I'd rather have it be a little longer than not long enough at all. Not really doing this job at all. So good job overall. You've got a 98, which is obviously an awesome grade for your first draft. Just remember that your references page should actually begin right here. The title should be up here, and it should have a double spacing here. This looks like 2.5 spaces or 3 even, so it should be double spaced, and this all should be double spaced too. But you do have the correct hanging indents there, so that's very good. All right, now Era of Happy Tech Workers is over is the part of the title. That should be actually in quotation marks, and then the Los Angeles Times would be correctly done in the in italics. But then the rest of this, all of this. All this that comes from the website or the PDF, the name of the PDF, that should not be in italics. Only the Los Angeles Times company or whatever it actually is. Okay, so that's it. Just make sure you fix all this and have that way you'll have an awesome draft to use for part 1 of your final project. And very nice job. Great job, Burtram.